What do the movies Backdraft, Devil in a Blue Dress, and Old School have in common? Well, their characters all live in American bungalows, typically rectangular-shaped, one-story, mostly brick homes with plenty of windows and thick porches. Bungalows are also the homes of characters in the movie Training Day, LA Confidential, Must Love Dogs, and Monster-in-Law. And you can see bungalows in the TV series Beverly Hills 90210, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and Marin. Even in Hollywood's early years, Culver Studios constructed bungalows for its offices and residential spaces for actors. Alfred Hitchcock worked out of one, and Clark Gable and Vivien Leigh inhabited two while they filmed Gone with the Wind. So why is Hollywood so taken with American bungalows? And where does Chicago fit into the picture? Well, let's find out on today's Walking Tour Wednesday. I'm Kelly with Chicago Movie Tours, and today we are exploring the bungalow, Chicago, and Hollywood. Our goal today is threefold. First, to go over a brief history of the American bungalow. Second, to distinguish between 5 types of Chicago bungalows. And third, to look at 4 reasons the bungalow is so conducive for on-location filmmaking. And with that third goal, I'll take you inside a bungalow. Now let's start with a quick history of the American bungalow. The bungalow's origins hail from India. In fact, the name bungalow derives from the Indian cottage known as the bangla. In the early 1900s, the bungalow exploded in America. It was a national phenomenon in every part of the country that encountered population growth in the 1910s and 1920s. American bungalows could be built for as little as $900 before World War I, so that helped many Americans fulfill their wish of owning a home. The bungalow's simple lines allowed for easy and fast construction. That led to pre-cut kit homes that could be shipped anywhere near a railway. The bungalow is supposed to appear to be growing out of the earth, so many of them actually came with fruit trees and a vegetable garden to supply food for the family. American bungalows also introduced the breakfast nook, slide-out cutting boards, deep bin drawers, telephone niches, and fold-out ironing boards. I am standing in front of Chicago bungalows, which are based on the style that we just talked about, but they've been modified to fit Chicago's climate, lot size, and available building materials. It is estimated that over 100,000 bungalows are built in the city of Chicago alone, and 13 neighborhoods within Chicago are designated as historic bungalow districts. We are in Berwyn, a suburb a little bit west of Chicago that has its own bungalow district. In fact, the houses in the neighborhood that we're going to be exploring in the next few minutes were added to the National Register of Historic Places in 2015. Now, within the context of the Chicago bungalow, there are numerous styles and variations, and that's going to be our second goal today, is to be able to distinguish between 5 of those. So let's get started. The Craftsman and Prairie style are the most common. As we walk down the street together here, you'll notice a few characteristics of these Chicago bungalows. They are rectangular in form, they have low-pitched roofs, and they are almost entirely constructed out of brick. And there are a few reasons that that's the case. Number 1, that's a fire-protected material. Number 2, it's a pretty sturdy material to stand through harsh winters in Chicago. Number 3, brick makes for a well-insulated house. And number 4, you need relatively little maintenance when you have a brick home. You'll also notice that these houses are built on pretty narrow urban lots, and the entrance to each of them is slightly off-center, and that's to suggest an informal and friendly welcome. Since these homes are based partly on the Prairie style or the Prairie movement, they are supposed to be, again, one with nature. So the front porches for each of these homes are enclosed and they jut out just slightly as a sort of outside room to give the family a seat close to nature. The exterior colors of these homes are usually reflective of nature as well. They have greens, browns, golds, taupes in them. There are also lots of windows and light to provide air, a feeling of openness, and a connection to the gardens that are below them. Finally, you might also notice as we have been traveling along here that the brick differs on the front and the sides of some of these bungalows. You have two types of brick that are used. The face brick, which is decorative, more expensive, and it also allowed each house to be individualized. And the standard brick, which you see on the side of the house, is a lowered price brick. So you definitely want your decorative face brick facing the street and your neighbors. A second style of Chicago bungalow is the Romanesque Revival. As we walk along here, you'll notice the barriers that are extending from the wall at the edge of the roof, relatively flat but with a slight detailing at the top. You also might notice these walls are thick and sturdy, and again, like the Craftsman and the Prairie style homes that we looked at a moment ago, made almost entirely of brick and stone. Colonial Revival is a third style of Chicago bungalow. In these few homes, notice the front gable bays and the fan light window placed above the first story windows. The Spanish Mission Revival is the fourth style of Chicago bungalow. You'll notice in these two homes the front slanted roof that is clad in Spanish red tile, and you also will see an arched entry portico. Tudor Revival is the final style of Chicago bungalow that we'll look at. In these houses, as we walk along, notice the steeply pitched roofs at each entrance, and then around those doors, the rough cut stone. You'll also see that same stone around the windows. Now that we're familiar with the bungalow, let's look at 4 reasons this particular type of house is so conducive for on-location filmmaking. Number 1, location. Although the bungalow descends from India, it took hold in Southern California in the late 1800s, so geographic proximity is a key reason Hollywood gravitates toward bungalows. And because so many bungalows exist in and around Los Angeles, renting one, as opposed to constructing the facade of a house, makes for way cheaper shooting. Number 2, floor plans. From a cinematographer's perspective, bungalows are ideal because they are wide and flat. They have relatively open floor plans, which makes it easy for casts and crew to move about. Here is an example of what a bungalow looks like inside and why it's easy for large cameras and significant amount of people to move around while filming on location. Notice how each of the rooms flows into the other. The kitchen flows into the dining room into the foyer area, and the foyer area into the living room. In other words, there is plenty of space for cameramen and women to move their equipment around the casts, the furniture, and anything else within the space. Number 3, yard. The bungalow's yard is usually full of foliage. Again, it's an architecture that functions as an extension of nature, sprouting from the earth, as it were. So thick greenery helps block out other houses and cars that the cinematographer may not want in the background of the camera's frame. And number 4, style. The bungalow style is simple, casual, unfussy, you might say. The interior is fairly understated, but it has custom details like built-in shelving, window seats, and reading nooks. It was a clear reaction to the ornate characteristics of the previous era's Victorian homes, so that makes the bungalow uniquely American. So bungalows then, through their sturdy look, earthy colors, and homey feel, exude the sense of stability, old-fashioned values, and the American dream. Next time you're watching a movie or a TV series that features bungalows, think about how that house complements the character that lives within it. We could take Backdraft, for example, a film that was shot both in and outside of Chicago and that features a Chicago bungalow. The characters Stephen, played by Kurt Russell, and Helen, played by Rebecca De Mornay, live here. In this scene, Russell's character, a fireman, is mending the couple's roof. The couple's marriage is not going well, and Stephen's brother Brian, played by William Baldwin, is really getting on his nerves. As a result, Stephen takes to the roof to beat out his frustration. We know 3 things about Stephen at this point in the film. He is an experienced fireman, he represents Chicago's working middle class, and he is a traditionally American male character in that he is active, strong, and determined. It makes sense then that Stephen and his wife would live in a Chicago bungalow, itself in part a representation of working middle-class Chicagoans' sturdiness and reliability. Well, that does it for today's Walking Tour Wednesday. If you are interested in learning more about Chicago bungalows, you can, hopefully one day soon, take a bungalow tour with the Berwyn Historical Society, or you can participate in bungalow preservation activities with the Chicago Bungalow Association. I'm Kelly with Chicago Movie Tours, and we'll see you here next week for another Walking Tour Wednesday.